Thank you for visiting our Battle of Aughrim animated map and guide. Here you will learn about one of the bloodiest battles in Irish history, which took place on the 12th of July 1691 between the Williamite and the Jacobite armies. After your visit, we hope you will understand how Irish history was shaped here and how our people shaped history. Aughrim is a small village in County Galway, Ireland.
On July the 12th, 1691, two kings, James II and William of Orange, fought at Aughrim for the throne of England. Neither king was present on the day of the battle. King William's army, comprising Dutch, Danish, German, Huguenot, English, Scottish and Anglo-Irish troops, was commanded by a Dutch general, Godard de Ginkle. The Jacobite army of King James, comprising Irish and French troops, was commanded by a French general, the Marquis de Saint-Rout. The Jacobites numbered just over 17,000, the Williamites marginally more. The armies faced each other along parallel lines running from north to south. The central area of the battlefield between the two armies was very difficult to cross because of the boggy and marshy nature of the terrain. The battle itself was straightforward with few complex manoeuvres. Attacks by Ginkle's continental troops along the Aughrim Pass to the south, and by his English, Scottish and Anglo-Irish infantry across the soft ground in the centre were both repulsed. News of Saint-Rout's death from a chance cannon shot disconcerted the Jacobite left flank, which failed to prevent a Williamite advance along the North Pass, a narrow toka or causeway leading to Aughrim village. This manoeuvre turned the flank of the Jacobite centre, and some 3,000 Irish infantry were cut down as they were forced back in disorder across the summit of Kilcommodon and beyond. The Williamites may have suffered up to 2,000 casualties, nearly all before the forcing of the toka. The defeat of Aughrim demoralised the Jacobites and hastened their fall at Limerick, which ended the war the following October.
Stop 1. Battle of Aughrim Visitor Centre. The centre is located in the village of Aughrim, off the R446, between Ballinasloe and Lough Ray. The Battle of Aughrim Visitor Centre in Aughrim village was built in 1992. And here you can follow the course of the battle through an audio-visual presentation.
This presentation will take you on a virtual tour of the battle site, but if you wish, you may well decide to walk this route later by yourself or with some group. Please exit the Aughrim Centre car park, turn left and walk straight ahead for 57 metres. Bear right and follow the sign for the Battle of Aughrim Historical Trails. It is 84 metres to the crossroads. Care should be taken as you cross this busy road. Proceed to stop 2, Battle Stand 4.
Before the battle, Saint-Rout, the French commander of the Jacobites, addresses his troops.
Stand to it, therefore, comrades, and suffer no longer the reproaches of those heretics who brand you with fear and cowardice. Be assured that His Gracious Majesty, King James, will love and reward you. That His Most Christian Majesty, Louis of France, will protect you. That the Holy Mother Church will pray for you, and all good Catholics shall applaud you. that your ears will bless you, and that I, myself, will command you.
The Jacobite, or Irish, have taken up a defensive position along the 2-mile length of this hill on either side of this road. If you are facing the battle stand, then the Williamite forces are straight ahead of you. Your commander is the French general, the Marquis de Saint-Rout, and his stirring address is still on your mind. So far, Sunday, July 12th, 1691, is turning out to be a good day for the Jacobite army. Attacks by Ginkell's continental troops along the Aughrim Pass to the south, and by his English, Scottish and Anglo-Irish infantry across the soft ground in the centre, are both repulsed. In the distance, you can hear Saint-Rout shout,
They are beaten. Let us now beat them back to the gates of Dublin. Le jour est à nous, mes enfants.
Saint-Rout is on his way north on horseback at the head of his bodyguard detachment. He plans to take command of the final attack that will destroy the enemy army. He stops near where you are now to redirect his artillery fire at the enemy position, when suddenly the enemy artillery opens fire. Between the noise and smoke you can barely make out what is happening. As the smoke clears, Saint-Rout's bloodied corpse falls from his saddle, decapitated by a chance round shot. In order to conceal this disaster from the rest of the troops, the guardsmen wrap the body in a cloak, and a messenger is sent to his deputy, Chevalier de Tesse, informing him that he is now in command of the army. The confusion that follows proves decisive for the outcome of the battle. The defeat which followed was described ever after as Ireland's great disaster.
Legend has it that some 500 metres up this hill, a thorn bush grows at the spot where Saint-Rout died. The spot is marked with an information plaque.
You can now proceed to Bloody Hollow. Stop 3, Battle Stand 3, by following the sign for the Battle of Aughrim historical trails.
Before Saint-Rout's death, the Jacobite forces had a number of successes along their battle line. An attack by the Williamites on the Jacobite centre resulted in ferocious fighting, as attack turned into counter-attack. One such encounter occurred here at Bloody Hollow, when 4 battalions of Huguenot soldiers, fighting on the Williamite side and led by Colonel de la Melonier, attempted to cross the treacherous boggy ground which lay between them and the lower slopes of Kilcommodon Hill. As you stand by the battle stand, try to imagine the scene.
Led by de la Melonier, the Huguenots force their way through the clinging mud, which in places has reached their waists, and try to reorganise themselves on firmer ground on the far side of the bog. Compressed by the terrain and pushed from behind by their comrades, the Frenchmen are unable to deploy in any orderly way. They find themselves hemmed in by the steep slopes of Kilcommodon Hill, and unable to advance, become sitting targets for the Jacobite troops above them. Despite the deployment of an arrangement of pointed stakes or chevaux de frise by the Williamite forces, a barrage of musket fire follows from the Jacobites, and black smoke envelops the scene. Ever since, the area you now stand in has been known as Bloody Hollow, because of the ferocity of the fighting that occurred here, and also because the ground was soaked with blood which flowed into the hollow.
You can now follow the Battle of Aughrim historical trail sign to Battle Stand 2 at Brazil Bridge.
At Brazil Bridge, Battle Stand 2. You are now at the southern end of the Jacobite line, and it was here that the first major attempt was made by the Williamite forces to break the Jacobite defences. After surveying the Jacobite deployment, the commander of the Williamite forces, General Ginkell, and his senior generals agreed that an attack on the Jacobite right flank around Attybrassel would
yield the best chances of gaining a lodgment onto Kilcommodon Hill.
We can then push the Jacobites away from their prepared defences and open their lines to a general assault.
The attack plans were put in place, and at a critical stage of the assault, a regiment of Dutch dragoons was ordered to move towards the bridge. This regiment was known as the Dutch Guard Dragoons, and its commander was Colonel Abraham van Eppinger. On the Jacobite side, this deployment was noticed by Patrick Sarsfield, a young, dashing cavalry commander. As soon as he saw the Dutch dragoons move towards the bridge, Sarsfield put himself at the head of the first troop of lifeguards and signalled to 2 other regiments to join him. Together, the 3 regiments, over 600 men strong, advanced towards the bridge.
The cream of the Jacobite cavalry now launched itself at the advancing Dutch dragoons and hit them with such force that they were driven back and collided with their own Enniskillen dragoons stationed nearby. The Williamite forces were thrown into a confused melee and began to give ground. The attack around Attybrassel Bridge was halted, but the reinforcements needed to stem this attack was to leave a gap in the Jacobite defences later that day. Ginkell would have another throw of the dice.
You can now follow the Battle of Aughrim historical trail sign to Battle Stand 1, the Pass of Aughrim.
The ridge of high ground on the south side of the battlefield is known as the Pass of Aughrim. The boggy ground to the north was difficult for infantry to cross and impassable to cavalry. General Ginkell's opening manoeuvre was to send his Dutch, Danish and Huguenot troops forward along this pass against the right wing of the Jacobite position on Kilcommodon Hill.
This particular manoeuvre proved unsuccessful. Other notable failures by the Williamite forces during the day should also be commented on. At about 6:30 p.m, Ginkell decided, in a daring attack, to send 4 regiments through the bog in the centre. These regiments were commanded by Colonels Thomas Earle, Charles Herbert, Abraham Creighton and Richard Brewer. Because of the prevailing conditions, the regiments had to wade through mud and water, which at times reached to their necks. When they eventually reached firmer ground, they were confronted by infantry positions, which were well secured by William Dorrington and Thomas Hamilton. A series of hedgerows containing a nasty surprise also confronted them, and in addition, Sir Ruth had ordered Dominic Sheldon's infantry into the fray. The Irish detachments manning the hedgerows now allowed the Williamite forces to come within almost point-blank range, remaining in position until the very last moment to reveal themselves. As the enemy units were still forming up, having reached firm ground, each of the Jacobite ranks delivered a crashing volley, and while the redcoats were still reacting to the sudden onslaught, quickly retired directly backwards to the next hedgerow and the next prepared position. When the Williamite officers eventually launched their own attack, they found the enemy position was vacant. This deadly formula was repeated again and again as the Williamite forces were drawn from one vacated hedgerow to another. Eventually, the order was given to attack, and Earl's battalion was swamped by the Irish infantry and suffered very heavy casualties. Colonels Earl and Herbert were taken prisoner. It has been estimated that up to 1/3 of the Williamite attack force were lost here. To add insult to injury, Colonel Gordon O'Neill's regiment advanced and captured a Williamite battery on the Aughrim side of the bog. Several other Williamite regiments tried to cross the bog at Foats, nearer to Aughrim, but all were beaten back. Saruth was jubilant. His vulnerable right had held and was still holding. His centre exceeded his expectations, and it only needed his strong left to hold, and the day was his.
Le jour est à nous, mes enfants!
He exclaimed.
It was from Aughrim Hill that Ginkle now surveyed the battle lines. The attacks on the Jacobite right flank around Attybrazel Bridge had been repulsed, and now in the centre 1/3 of his infantry was in full retreat. Ginkle and a Scottish general called Mackay had agreed earlier that day that the decisive engagement would take place at the northern end of the Jacobite line, around Aughrim Bridge and village, and the setbacks suffered on the battlefield now made that northern attack inevitable.
You can now follow the Battle of Aughrim historical trail sign to Battle Stand 5. The North Pass.
You are now on your way to finding out what brought this bloodiest of battles to its terrible end. Battle Stand 5 marks the North Pass and was the key that unlocked the whole carefully constructed Jacobite defence line. Before that key could be turned, however, Ginkle had ordered Lieutenant Colonel Henry Rowe to establish a bridgehead beyond the end of this very narrow pass or causeway, due south of Aughrim Castle and village. Rowe had successfully carried out his orders, and 4 battalions of roughly 2,000 men were in place to provide cover to any troops attempting to force a passage across the causeway near to where you now stand.
The causeway itself could only accommodate 2 riders travelling abreast. Any force attempting to cross had 2 alternatives, either a very quick crossing or be trapped. It was along this bottleneck that Ginkle and Mackay now proposed to pass 5 regiments of horse, 2 of dragoons, and around 3,000 officers and men in full view of the enemy. The Jacobite deployment here was such that they should have been able to stop any advance at their ease.
Knowing that this was the last throw of the dice, Mackay rode over to the waiting troops and ordered them into this death trap. Their refusal to cross was followed by the refusal of one of their officers to even reconnoitre the ground ahead. Mackay then turned his horse and on his own made a dash across the North Pass. When he returned, he made this impassioned appeal to his troops.
You're the last hope of the Protestant Church in this eternal fight against Catholic treachery. You're fighting not only for your church, but for your own wives and children. Will they be forever slaves under French rule? As soldiers and men, your honour demands you to advance. Advance!
The 2 most experienced of the Williamite regiments now got ready to cross. The plan was for Sir Francis Compton to lead the crossing, followed by Colonel Levison leading the Royal Dragoons.
If the crossing proved successful, Levison would cross, dismount, and push towards Aughrim village and castle, which is our next stop. You can now follow the Battle of Aughrim historical trail sign to Battle Stand 6, Aughrim Castle.
Aughrim Castle, a semi-ruin even in 1691, was a Jacobite strongpoint covering the North Pass into Aughrim village. A detachment from William Burke's regiment of Fusiliers now looked from the castle and aimed their fire at the Williamite troops ready to run the gauntlet.
Compton's and Levison's regiments now thundered across the causeway as Burke's Fusiliers rained down musket fire on them from the castle. The Williamites used artillery to suppress this fire. Dragoons fell from their saddles as riderless horses galloped across the causeway. The death trap was taking its toll. As more and more riders crossed the pass, the volleys began to slacken and become less and less controlled. Tradition has it that the reserve ammunition was of the wrong calibre, and that the men were reduced to using stones and buttons instead.
Successfully across, the troops formed a planned defensive screen, while Levison dismounted his dragoons and, spreading out from such a narrow formation, advanced towards Aughrim Castle and village.
Shortly before this action took place, Saint Rout had cried,
Le jour est à nous, mes enfants.
Even as news reached him about the causeway crossing, Saint Rout remained calm.
They are brave fellows. 'Tis a pity they should be so exposed.
He had 2 brigades under Major General Dominic Sheldon and Henry Luttrell operating on his left wing, with more than enough firepower to defeat the Williamites' latest manoeuvre. At the head of his bodyguard detachment, he would join Sheldon and take personal command of the final attack, which would beat the Williamites back to Dublin. Word was passed along the line to Henry Luttrell, who was positioned to the rear of Aughrim village, that Saint Rout was on the way.
But, as we learned, while making his way, Saint Rout stopped to inspect 2 Jacobite artillery batteries, and a cannon shot not only ended his life, but also the chance for victory.
The chain of command from Saint Rout through to Détesse and onward to Sarsfield was now seriously compromised. Up to this point, one might have viewed Saint Rout's conduct of the battle as reactive, as he countered each move of Ginkell's. As a result, his overall battle plan could not have been agreed or communicated in any great detail to Détesse, as each attack needed a quick reactive response. Saint Rout's decision to join Sheldon in a full frontal attack had not been communicated to Détesse, who, along with Sarsfield, was now at some distance from the action on the northern flank. With the command link broken, some confusion and indecision was inevitable.
As more and more troops crossed the causeway and spread out across the Jacobites' left flank, the role played by Major General Dominic Sheldon and Henry Luttrell came into sharp focus.
You can now follow the Battle of Aughrim historical trail sign to Battle Stand 7, Luttrell's Pass.
Luttrell's Pass was called after Henry Luttrell, who was posted here with a force of horsemen to guard the mouth of the North Pass leading into Aughrim. Following on from events described at your last stop, the situation had become critical for the Jacobite troops around Aughrim village.
The enemy, led by the Marquis de Rouvigny and Major General Heer van Gravenmoor, now posed a real threat to the Jacobite left flank. But no orders about what to do had come true from Détesse. From his position to the rear of Aughrim village, Henry Luttrell was becoming very nervous. Increasing numbers of enemy cavalry had now crossed the causeway and were forming up to his front. With only 4 regiments of dragoons, he could not hope to stop any determined enemy attack, only delay it. If he dismounted and tried to occupy the village, he stood the real chance of being surrounded and taken prisoner. He sent an urgent message to his senior officer, Dominic Sheldon, asking both for instructions and reinforcements. Sheldon had received word that Saint-Ruth was on his way and so held off making any decision until Saint-Ruth arrived. But as we know, that fateful cannon shot stopped Saint-Ruth from ever arriving.
With Sheldon and Luttrell caught in a web of confusion and indecision, the Marquis de Rouvigny attacked. Outnumbered and unwilling to make a stand, Luttrell ordered his men to withdraw from the battlefield. As a result, some accounts of the battle use words such as treason to describe his action. Shortly after Luttrell's withdrawal, Sheldon also withdrew his forces and exposed the Jacobite left flank to devastating and decisive attacks.
Battalions on the extreme left of the Jacobite line were unable to react quickly enough to the sudden eruption of enemy troops on their flanks, and the line began to be rolled up, north to south.
This brought the Battle of Aughrim to a bloody conclusion.
Forget not the field where they perished, the truest, the last of the brave, all gone, and the bright hope we cherished gone with them, and quenched in their grave.